Technology, it's huge technology. I use it all the time. It's great. Everybody needs to use it. Computers, they're out there. There are lots of them. They're great. Students love them.
Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour.
Brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas.
And I'm Suzanne Zargis.
We're coming to you from a conference room in Central Office, bringing you the latest news in the Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom.
We'll also inform you of the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you are new to using technology in the classroom or are a seasoned vet, we are here to help.
So thank you for joining us today. Before we get into In Case You Missed It, to let you know who's here, I'm Mike Thomas.
I'm Suzanne Zargis.
I'm Brendan Reed.
And so, in case you missed it, the latest blog post is out, and it's all about tech integration into your classroom. Now, this is not your standard article where it's like, here, try this tool, try this tool. It's more of a breakdown of why you would try to integrate technology into the classroom, and one very important thing to remember at the very end of the article. So, go on out there to the We Learn My SPS page, read the blog, or you can also read it on Brightspace blog, looking for my name, Mike Thomas.
In case you missed it, the H drive is going away. You have about 1 or 2 weeks left to move all of your files from the H drive to the OneDrive. Hopefully you've already done so. If not, please feel free to email us at DLA Support with any questions. It really isn't that difficult and shouldn't take too long, so don't be worried.
And in case you missed it, we have new training videos on Microsoft Stream available through Office 365, where we have about 25 Brightspace videos, training videos, Dino, and a set of inspirational TED Talks for you to view. We encourage you to check them out.
In case you missed it, you may have seen that your laptop has a new program on there, especially if you are using Windows 10. It's called Photos. It's an updated version of the past where you can actually use it now to make videos. You can use it taking 3D paints and putting them in there so you can animate videos. It essentially has replaced Movie Maker, and it's a lot simpler to use. It even comes with some themes and background music just for you to use. So go ahead, you can look at it. If you don't have Windows 10, this is a great opportunity to remind you to upgrade to Windows 10 because everything works better in 10.
That's it for In Case You Missed It. Coming up next, Hot Takes.
So for this week's Hot Take, we're actually going to continue what we had done the prior weeks, which was talk all about blended learning. And instead of blended learning, our new topic is going to be about the one-to-one initiative and what that means and what it looks like and where it's from and other places that are doing it. Maybe some pros, maybe some cons. We'll see where the conversation goes, but this conversation, again, is a longer one, so it'll go over the course of a number of weeks. With that in mind, here is the beginning. So what is one-to-one? One-to-one computing is educational practice where a school or institution gives every student a laptop, tablet, or mobile device. It's very popular at universities where students buy a school-issued laptop with preloaded programs and textbooks. One-to-one computing is becoming more popular in K-12 schools where the institutions purchase the devices. So what does that look like for Springfield? So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. We're here with both Brendan and Suzanne. In this district, we do not purchase, but we have on lease, like a car lease, where every 4 years the laptops get refreshed. Students from the first of that group get new laptops, and I think those have even started going out into schools now, because we've been working on this for a number of years. I see head nodding, so.
Yes, I would agree with that. And honestly, I think our fabulous interview with Paul Foster went into more detail about the specifics for our district. So if any of our listeners have questions or want more details as to our one-to-one program, we can definitely go back and tell you specifically which episode that is. But yes, I think you are correct, Mike. And the reason we're doing that, Mike, is so that as technology changes so incredibly quickly, I mean, how many times have you had a computer at home and you're just getting comfortable with the way everything works, and then boom, it's like old and outdated and everybody's laughing at you because you still have that old computer. So we want to make sure that our students have the most up-to-date technology.
Spot on, Suzanne. Yeah, that's the purpose of our lease program, so we can have new devices in a cycle for our students as we try to focus on personalized learning for all of our kiddos so they can enjoy all the advantages of a rural school district. That really is why we're trying to develop our 21st century learners and why the one-to-one initiative has been so important in doing so.
And I think this really comes back to the question. I went back before we started recording today, I went back to look at the Mass Live article that came out at the beginning of the school year, which really promoted what we're doing with the one-to-one initiative and why we're doing it. And then I looked at some of the comments, and there were, of course, the trolls who make the mean comments. Why do they need this? We learned with paper and pencil. That's all you ever need. Blah, 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 blah. The trolls. And so that got me thinking, like, why laptops? Why laptops in particular? And I don't know if this is the entire reason. I wasn't here when we first started the process. Both Brendan and I came on in the middle of it. But I started to think, I'm like, with tablets, they're not as durable. The batteries don't last as longer. And just that point that you said about keeping everything up to date, tablets go out of date faster than laptops do. Because at least with laptops, you can add stuff to them. Tablets, you're stuck. And then I started thinking about, well, what about Chromebooks? So my knowledge of Chromebooks, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, because I very well could be, because I don't know enough about them. But they're cheap for a reason. I think that they also require you to be connected to the internet a lot. And from what I know, most jobs in the real world don't use Chromebooks. They use actual laptops. And so providing the students with an actual laptop really helps them.
Exactly. I think that's a very good point, Mike. And one of the articles, because as always, Mike provided us with a long list of articles just so that we were completely well-rounded in our discussion today. But one of them I loved because it really made me think. I know we had laptops. Many other districts are using the iPads or Chromebooks, and I never really understood why laptops, because same as you, I came on, after the fact, and that decision had already been made. But this one particular article spoke to the fact that iPads are really I can't think of the right word, but they're not all-encompassing. They're very closed. So you can teach students using iPads, but you're limited as to what they can do on an iPad versus when you've got a laptop and access to the world, you can do so much more. And it made me think about how maybe so many districts were drawn to the iPads, not just because they were the in thing at that time, but because that was an easier way for teachers to ease into this whole one-to-one mindset, that they could still teach the way they always taught and just add a little bit with the iPad versus with everything we're doing with our laptops. It's a major shift, and it's a huge ask of our teachers, but we know they can handle it. And I think in the end, the students are going to benefit a huge amount.
So I know your daughter is in college right now. We were talking about it before we started. So at her school, did they have this option for students to buy a laptop before or like rent a laptop with the preloaded textbooks? Because let me tell you, that sounds very appealing for The Price is Right.
Right. No, she did not have that option. They had desktops, I believe, available to them, but they pretty much assumed that the students going to that school had a computer at home. And she had a lot of homework assignments that required internet access. and a lot of her teachers did use Google Docs and other ways of collaborating and sharing. But in the end, she's in college now. And the one thing that was missing, even though I thought she was well exposed to technology, she never learned Word and Excel. So now she's in college and she's asking me questions about how to use Word and Excel. So that's one thing we have to stay on top of.
Yeah, understandable, Suzanne. And before I joined Springfield Public Schools, I came from a small, affluent private school where I worked in the IT department. And one of the questions we grappled with was, what devices should we allow students to bring to school? The school had decided that they were going to go one-to-one. However, the school wasn't going to be procuring the devices for the students. It was going to be much like a college, like what your daughter was allowed to choose. However, the school wanted to dictate what kind of device the student would bring to the school. So whether it be an iPad, Microsoft Surface, laptop, and I can tell you that, the school ended up choosing Apple iPads, actually. Now, mind you, this is an affluent private school in a rural area. However, the school mandated that the students purchase Microsoft software, Excel, Word, and PowerPoint for their Apple devices to learn that functionality, which I guess, Suzanne, kind of feeds into your point that your daughter isn't quite accustomed to the Microsoft suite. However, the school chose to have their students purchase an expensive piece of technology, which would eventually be outdated, which wasn't on a lease, and also the Microsoft suite as well for the practical everyday learning. So, obviously we weren't here when we chose which devices would be purchased for our students. But it just goes to show that there's a multitude of reasons that go into these decisions. It really is interesting to see, especially as one-to-one becomes more prominent and almost mandatory in education today.
Yeah, it really adds to the ability to do a lot of the things that, as 21st century learners, we're really trying to push forward. And so, in all of the work that we're going to be talking about over the next number of minutes, I think the biggest lens comes through is like how to do one-to-one well. And I think as a district, we've taken a lot of the steps forward because there's been so many people before us coming up with ways that it's worked, ways that it hasn't. So we've been able to kind of cull that list and ease a lot of those fears of teachers who are saying that this is not a great idea, that all these laptops, all whatever, it's been great. One of the articles, I don't remember which one, I just copied it into my notes here. There was a quote from Binbin Zhang, an assistant professor of counseling, education, psychology, and special education at Michigan State University. That's a mouthful.
That's quite a title.
But in their research that they were doing, because they were researching the whole one-to-one initiative, and they said it's not like just providing a laptop to every student will automatically increase student achievement, but we find that it's the first step. And so within the article, it continued to go on using statistical techniques to analyze already completed studies. They found that the one-to-one program on average had a statistically significant positive impact on student test scores in English, language arts, writing, math, and science. The limited number of rigorous quantitative studies available to analyze means further analysis is warranted, but the findings are clearly a good sign for the one-to-one proponents. And as a district, we are proponents of this. We think that it can, and we have started to see some of those improvements come along.
Right. I think it's interesting that you noted that, Mike, because in two different articles, both talking about successful one-to-one implementations, one of them stated that you should not implement a one-to-one program simply to increase your test scores. And the other one stated how their implementation directly affected their test scores. And it seemed that even though they were very successful, that was definitely something that they were looking for. They had that in the back of their mind that they wanted those scores to increase. But to clarify a little bit on that one, they implemented almost in pilot mode. It was a very small rollout that they started with. So I can understand rolling it out that way, that yes, you could very clearly and immediately see test score results. Whereas when you've got a much larger district that you're working with, you want to make sure that it's not just the test scores, that it's the way of teaching and effective teaching and engaged learning that we're really looking for, not just the device.
Yeah, I really think that that's the key part. It doesn't have anything to do with the actual technology. But I think I felt like in a few of the articles they talked about, like, if your school is not doing well with the curriculum and content-wise, it doesn't matter if you add technology to it. You're still not going to be doing well curriculum and content-wise.
Exactly.
And so those things need to kind of be hand in hand. And so with our district, and the academic team is a very strong team, and building up all the skills of the teachers in the district to help them with the content. Now, that's where our job comes in, is to help with how do we implement technology into their content already. And I feel like this comes back to like some of the blended learning conversation that we had, where if you've got great teachers who can teach well and use the content effectively, they're going to succeed. If you've got teachers who can't, they are still going to struggle, even if you give them all the technology in the world. I mean, sometimes we joke like, oh, if we just gave the kids the answers to the test, it'd be great. If we just gave kids the laptop, it would be great. But it doesn't kind of work that way. Like, you can't just drop a laptop in front of a kid and say, here you go, we're going to use this now to improve our education.
Right. And I think for the teachers who are very comfortable in what I'll describe as, the old style of teaching, where it's more lecturing, they're the teachers that are going to have a hard time using technology, because it's so much more complicated and somewhat chaotic initially, until you have your room set up the right way and you've got the routine down and the students know what the expectations are using technology. It's incredibly different from standing up in front of your class, giving a lecture, and giving a test. It's you have to be willing to change and to make mistakes and not be afraid of technology.
Well, I think Suzanne speaks to a culture, right? So here at Springfield Public Schools, we're really trying to cultivate a culture of learning, not just with our students, but with our staff as well, right? By offering additional professional development, by offering additional technologies that kind of blend into what we already do have within our learning management system, Brightspace, and trying to evaluate where that culture is at for technology, and then supporting the technical needs. So what trainings can we offer? How can we support curriculum with our academic team? As Mike said, we have an incredibly strong academic team. What do they need? It's almost a what need question that we're asking ourselves every day here, I feel, as we try to utilize and promote technology within curriculum.
So with that in mind, so in regards to like what's next in all of this is, again, if we're thinking about that content and curriculum and we're focusing on it and we are developing the culture, as you were talking about, Brendan, it's all about how can we use the computers. And if we're just plopping it, like I was saying, if we're just plopping them in front of the kids and expecting it to do magic, it doesn't work that way. And I know a lot of teachers in some of the districts in the articles that we read about, that was kind of the approach that it seemed like they were taking. There was not a strong leadership group at the beginning, which kind of guided everything. Because can you imagine in this district how there's 25,000 students, and we're just dropping a laptop in front of them and saying, good luck?
You hit the nail on the head there, Mike. For us in our department here at Digital Learning, it's really about developing a plan to kind of give a roadmap, with the help of our academic directors, of course, who do such a fantastic job with our curriculum. For us, it's about making that vision possible at the school level, right? So we're not just plopping computers in front of kids so that the MCAT scores can go up. we're not just having an expectation blanket as that. We're doing it because we want to provide that extra tool to hopefully make education and teaching geared towards the 21st century. We want our kids, it's an informational age, and we want to provide that open resource that every kid should have available to them. And that's really, when we go out to schools and we talk with principals and we talk with teachers, that's the feedback I'm hearing, at least, is that this technology, with the right, curtailing, is allowing our students to really perform to their best abilities. Not necessarily in a quantifiable sense on the MCAS and all that great stuff. Of course, that's not the end goal for all of us. We just want our kids to be able to use this technology to become better learners in general.
Right, and they're going to be engaged learners. They're not going to be passive learners. They're going to be just fully involved and excited and probably teaching the adults in their building things about technology.
And how often do we hear that? It's not even just about them being engaged. It's about them understanding that there's an investment being made in them. That they have the opportunity to learn just the same as any other student in America. That we're taking the time to prepare and teach our educators so that they can have these resources as well. It's really about driving home that theme of equity across our district, and that's kind of the case in point as to why we do what we do.
Absolutely. I'm glad you brought that up. It reminded me of another podcast we did, Mike, where we were talking about worldwide how limited technology is, and that it was really North America and Europe that had the most technology available in their schools. But the whole rest of the world has so much more to offer, and they don't have it. So I'm proud to be part of a district that is offering technology to every student.
And it's really community driven, right? I mean, we have a school committee that's very forward thinking. We have a superintendent who's very forward thinking and allowing us to take advantage of these resources. It's something we're very fortunate to have.
So as we continue to look at the resources that we have and the forward thinking, I think that going the lease route with the laptops was almost like genius level in this one-to-one initiative. Because as you were mentioning at the beginning, Suzanne, like when you get home with your laptop, it's already out of date. When you get home with your iPad 29 is coming out. I don't know how they number them. I don't use Apple products. The ability to say after 4 years, being like, all right, this laptop has served its life purpose. We're now going to recycle it back, and that group of students will now see a new laptop in front of them. So I think in regards to the leadership, that was probably one of the best things that they could have done. That coupled with a real focus on adding the technology to the curriculum, not the other way around of here's my piece of technology, how do I fit it in? And I think that's like where we have this amazing new PD center that has been built that we'll be able to use starting in January. That's where all the trainings that we've done throughout the district for the last 2 years. I say 2 years, even though for Brendan and I, it really hasn't been 2 years, but some days it feels like it.
It sure does.
Where we've gone out and we've either met with groups of teachers, singular teachers, to really hone in on how they're using the technology in the classroom. And that's because the leadership has allowed us to do that. Like, I don't know how many jobs where you can go over to your boss and say, hey, I need to run out to the school for 30 minutes. I'll be back in an hour and a half. The driving back. Springfield traffic is crazy. Or hey, I'm going to go use a conference room and I'm going to Skype with a couple of teachers so we can figure this problem out on how they can implement it. I don't think there's many districts or jobs in general that would allow you to pick up and go.
Right, exactly. But we, as you know, Mike, we're just dedicated to helping teachers and principals use technology as effectively as they can. And we're a very small team, but we're willing to do whatever it takes to train as many people as we can. And I did want to mention, too, when you were talking about the fact that we have leadership that is so good at emphasizing the fact that it's the teaching that comes first and then adding the technology to it. So the last 2 years, the professional development offered in August, just before the school year starts, I think has done a fabulous job of helping the teachers understand it's the teaching first, find a lesson, align it to the standards, and then think about, all right, what technology can we add to it?
Right, and that goes along with the SAMR model too, because anytime you're thinking about adding technology to your lesson, if you're just trying to shove it in there, it's not going to work.
It really comes down to organization, right? From the beginning to end with technology. And I have to give a quick shout out to our IT guys who do such a phenomenal job making sure that all of our devices work and providing access points at all of our facilities. I mean, we're no small school district. We have over 50 locations. We have tens of thousands, of devices, right? So without that organization, from the top down, really, we would literally just be completely lost.
I agree, Brendan. And I think there's probably a lot of districts, I don't know the statistics, but I'm guessing there's a lot of districts out there that just because of fear alone, thinking about that monumental task, have not started their one-to-one implementation. They're behind the eight ball.
I was even reading in our articles of some school districts that gave up one-to-one initiatives just because it seemed as though, they didn't specifically say it, but it seemed as though it was almost an overwhelming task to try to roll out, right? And I think this speaks to our culture here at Springfield too. I mean, our teachers and our administrators at the school level are incredibly patient. What they go through on a daily basis, I couldn't imagine, which is why I am where I am. But we're very fortunate to have such supportive staff at the schools who are willing to work with us, and all of us in IT, to ensure that their needs are met, their understanding, and we're very fortunate to have that relationship.
And if you're listening and you're like, well, I don't feel as supported, well, email us. We have email. We're available for you to answer questions at DLA support at, SpringfieldPublicSchools.com. If you are, as Brendan is saying, like, we are a very supportive team and we have that culture. If you feel like you're missing out, email us, Skype us, Yammer. All those things are ways to get a hold of not just us, but others in the district that are also willing to help. Coming up next is our interview with Thomas Rachele, an academic supervisor in the Springfield Public School District.
My name is Thomas Rachele. I am the supervisor of secondary English language arts in the libraries. I've been working in the district for, I think, 15 years now. 12 of those, I believe, are in the classroom. And now my role is curriculum specialist and working with teachers and ILSs.
All right. So with your role, you had mentioned that you started out for 12 years in the classroom. Can you describe what it was like using technology during that time?
Didn't quite grow up with technology. I used it as I started entering college, but I think I got my first laptop when I was getting my master's right before I started teaching. So it was still pretty new to me, but I remember always wanting to use the computers. We had the setup of 6 computers in the back of the classroom, and I tried to get kids on it when I could, and we would rotate through unless I was able to book the computer lab where we had the giant desktops, and it was really hot in there. But it was an event. Kids were able to show what they knew by using a PowerPoint, which was new to me at the time. But we tried to collaborate, and I would put them all on like drives, or not drives back then, they were CDs. So we would make CD covers, and we would share our work with one another that way through projects. And then I think about 5 to 7 years in from that, I got my first smartboard, and that sort of changed the way I did things and got the hang of things. It took some time. Really had to adjust my practice and realize what I was doing with the tool that's new. I realized that when I got a smartboard, I ended up presenting more than I was modeling or teaching. So I had to change that style, because after being observed, I was asked how I thought it went, and I wasn't really happy with it, because I realized I had done all the work outside the class to prepare for the class, so they didn't see the process. And now, as that's kind of grown toward I did my first virtual field trip to the Baseball Hall of Fame with a class after we worked with a 7th grade class working with Jackie Robinson and his story. And we were able to communicate with them and do something that we probably couldn't have done otherwise. So we were able to look at artifacts, to have a lesson taught to us by one of the museum docents, to look at and view archives and film and artifacts from Jackie Robinson, and have the students interact with the docent to discuss the things that they cared about because they weren't able to see it in person.
So that was a lot of growth in technology over time, starting with just a computer lab and then moving to the smart board. After going through everything that you've done using technology while you were a classroom teacher, is there things that you learned by the end that you wish you would have done at the beginning?
Yes. I wish I'd taken more risks at the beginning. Whenever I took a risk, I was always happy with it. But I took small risks at the beginning, and those led to larger risks, such as finding the technology and software to make a virtual field trip possible. Mm-hmm. And I kind of look at those things as opportunities. When somebody tells me something, I can't do something, I do it. Mm-hmm. It's just part of my nature, so it makes me want to try. Also, I am also by nature, I'm a fidgeter, and I wish I took more time to just mess around with technology, because in the years I've worked with technology in different programs or applications, I've never really messed up too much. So you can play around with things and it's fine. You hit the back button, you close it down, you might need a virus scan here or there, but ultimately you're trying it, you're using it. You need to feel somewhat comfortable, but that's just to present the surface level. The students are the ones who need to do all the work on, and that would be just the bigger piece is when you're learning technology, it's not just about you in the front of the room. It's about everybody else using it. So it's a productive and a receptive tool. So you may present in such a way that students get information, but then what are they doing with technology? So when I had a smart board, it was about figuring out ways for students to come up and use the smart board, not just a presentation tool, because I could have done that with an overhead projector or way back when to, the overhead sheets.
All those vis-a-vis.
Yeah. Washing your forearm for, the first 20 minutes when you get home. But it really is about the kids using the technology, and they'll teach you stuff. And it's a time when you're learning, and I understand that it's difficult to say to students, you have to teach me because you're supposed to have all the answers. But they have that technology, they're born into it. So they might not know how to apply it in the same way we would like them to in an academic setting, but they know how to use it. So you might have to teach them about fonts and margins, but they know how to use the program. Just we have to show them how we want it used in our setting. Yeah,
teaching them professional use of everyday tools.
Correct.
That was your time teaching. You've been an ILS. I'm assuming your role as an ILS. I'm just shortening that up. How has technology affected you in being able to do your job?
As an ILS, I think Brightspace, I'm not sure, I think it was just coming out, but as a supervisor, I use it to communicate with teachers, communicate with other ILSs to take a great lesson or PD, and I can push it into a module that people can look at and use over and over again. So I use it the same way we would hopefully have teachers use it and have an opportunity for one thing to be spread out over a variety to a wider audience. And it doesn't have to stop at one person. It can continue on and on. So if I am able to create something that is helpful to an ILS, they can bring it to their teachers. And then, it's sort of provides an opportunity for sort of a pyramid scheme of learning.
And we all know pyramid schemes can be bad, but this is not a bad one. So with your role as ILS, you get to supervisor. Sorry, I will get that right by the end. We'll edit out some of the mistake ones. As your role as supervisor, I imagine you get to spend a lot of time going into teachers' classrooms?
Yes.
What are some of the great things that you've seen teachers doing across the district?
Teachers have been using a variety of different applications that, such as Skype and Kahoot, Padlet, Poll Everywhere. And it's an opportunity to check for understanding, but to have students collaborate. And that collaboration does not have to exist in the 45 minutes to 90 minutes that they have during their school day. They can go on, they can discuss things after school. They can view lessons, they can view information and bring it back to the classroom. I've seen some people who are trying to flip their classroom a bit, where they just come in and, the kids have the background knowledge and then they can apply that during the day. And it's a day full of practice with that short mini lesson to kind of go over and say, do you have any questions? And, then they can move right into it. And really it's application for the majority of the class, which is great to see. And with that, every time they would post to something as a discussion or submit an assignment, it's there for that artifact of understanding. They can go back and go, hey, do you remember you thought this? How do you think now? So it's a really great reflective piece as well.
Suzanne wanted to be here with us today, but she is not up to snuff at the moment. And so she's out doing other things. But she had left me a few questions that she wanted me to ask you.
Sure.
And so one of those questions is, what do you feel is the biggest obstacle in getting teachers to embrace technology?
Confidence. I know teachers, they have a lot of confidence around their content and they're very well planned. And with technology, sometimes they're not as confident. So that puts up an obstacle. But also with regards to plans is you have to have a secondary plan. And I know that it's frightening to people, like, well, what if the technology doesn't work? So if you're apprehensive because it might not work, then you might not try it. But if you don't try it, how do you know? Mm-hmm. So it really is about being confident, taking the risks, and knowing that it's not going to be perfect every time. And being transparent with students and, administrators and other people in the building are like, hey, I'm trying this. Love you to come check it out. It might flop, but know that I'm trying it. Mm-hmm. But nobody wants their lesson to flop.
Right.
So that's kind of that piece where, its success is not hinging on them. It's hinging on something that is a variable.
So what tech tools do you use the most? What are some of the tools that you don't bother with? And what are some that you're interested in exploring? So it's kind of a three-part question.
Currently, the tech tool I use the most would be Brightspace. I'm on it probably daily. I would like to explore the ability to create my own web page, interactive web page, interactive unit planning guides, the possibility of the learning repository through Brightspace. It sounds really interesting to me as well. And the ones I don't use ones that I think your lesson intention becomes lost in the technology. It's not about like choosing fonts for half an hour. It's about like showing your information. So things that are overly cumbersome, I try to stay away from, and also ones that I don't think are going to move the students forward. It might be engaging and it might be neat, but if we can't lose rigor and content and mastery for neat.
Mm-hmm. I know one of the things we talked about in a prior podcast was the use of SAMR model, and one of the things that the article mentioned is not using technology for technology's sake. Like, you need to have good lessons. And so that goes right along with that last point that you were just making. With a good lesson, the technology is an addition, not a distraction.
Exactly. And when we were first looking at the SAMR model, I saw a module and I watched the video, and it was about taking an essay about Tom Sawyer. And they showed the different levels of SAMR, from writing a paper independently to writing a paper on a computer, to collaborating on Google Docs, to creating a PowerPoint presentation. And I liked everything up to the point to the PowerPoint presentation, because they had this wonderful paper that had a lot of depth to it. And they distilled it down to probably about a paragraph's worth of words and some pictures. So the intention, I thought, or level of rigor or demonstration of mastery of the standards was lost on that. So it's really finding what works for students to communicate what they know and demonstrate their application of the skills and knowledge needed to master the standards in a way that they might not have been able to do it before, such as a podcast.
That is true. And with that, maybe with that PowerPoint, there needed to be some sort of presentation aspect to it, so that they're not just reading like their distilled points, but maybe they're reading their paper as like a speech to go along with it. And then that maybe would have been more fitting of like proving your knowledge.
Exactly. So I'm a big fan of having to do things like a podcast or a mockumentary or some sort of prep where you still have all of that information that needs to go into a script or a plan, but it's the presentation style is what really kind of engages. And the technology enhances that because it goes out to such a wide audience, and you're thinking of all different levels of production and how to set, the tone and who's your audience and what's the purpose and all of that wonderful information you're bringing in and how you're going to build that to demonstrate, your understanding, but also to sell it. Because if you make a podcast or you create a video that you put out to the world, you want somebody to see it, so thinking about those factors as well.
So in all these things that we've talked about in your growth in using technology over the years, if you were to have to step back into the classroom next year, what would you be doing differently than you were when you were last teaching?
To be honest, I would probably flip my classroom. I know it's a lot of work up front, but I think that the idea of flipping the classroom and providing short lessons that students can view and review and refer to over and over again and create that pile where they can look at that at any time they need assistance. So we can come in ready with questions and ready to learn and apply those skills. I think that's kind of would be my big piece, is I would push to that just so that we can roll up our sleeves and get going without some of the time that it takes away from in-class explanation.
So flipping the classroom,
yeah,
that would be a huge step for a lot of teachers out there, and it'd be a huge step for the students too. How do you think the students would react to something like that? Or since you've seen it, how have they reacted? I've
seen a little bit of it. I haven't seen a full model. But if you think of what our students do when they go home, instead of giving them homework and practice that you can't support them in, why not give some of the lesson, which they're used to viewing, and looking at a computer and looking at screens for a good portion of their time. And some of the research I just looked at said that their kids aren't even watching TV anymore. If they go home, the screen they're looking at is either a phone screen or a computer screen. So if you could put your mini lesson or, your lesson on there for 15 minutes and they were able to kind of go through that, then that's what they're used to. It would be different to have them come in, and it would be a switch where you would take baby steps. But I think it would be really positive for the students because it's a medium they're used to. Everybody's viewed a video on YouTube, so now you're just viewing one that's about school. But you can go back and go, wait a minute, what did he say? Wait, what do I have to do? Hold on, did he say we're going to do that tomorrow? We're going to do all of that work? Yeah, we can check it out. And it's short, and, it's an opportunity to come and practice with the support of the teacher for the full class.
So as we wrap up our podcast here, is there anything else that you'd like to leave out there for all of our listeners?
I would say the key is just try it. Just practice, take the risk. It will work most of the time, and the other times think about what you can learn from it. And, your students are forgiving. If the technology doesn't work that day, they'll help you figure out stuff. And it's important that everybody needs to just give it a shot. And also assess what kids know and can do and see how they can apply that to how we want them to. Because, again, they know a lot of different strategies and they know a lot of things they can do on the computer. It's taking those skills that they have growing up in the age of technology and having them be able to apply them in an academic setting.
Awesome. Thank you for your time today. I know it's always a busy day on Thursdays as we're getting ready for wrapping up, and you guys usually have your meetings on Fridays.
Yep. Thank you very much. It was great to be here.
Guys, so you got to hear one of our colleagues this week in our interview with Thomas Rachele. We meet with him bi-weekly a lot of times, and his desk is close enough that he continues to walk over and ask us questions whenever he gets stuck on anything. So we're kind of his little help desk, the little chat function, minus the whole chatting and just walking over. So what do you guys think?
Well, I thought the interview was incredibly informative. Tom is somebody who's on the forefront of integrating technology in education and has always been supportive of our causes and has always given us good feedback regarding softwares that we explore. and look to integrate into our Springfield Public Schools. There were some interesting key points, and I look forward to kind of bringing them up as we delve into the content of what he had to say. Suzanne?
Yeah, I loved the interview, Mike. What I found eye-opening, which I should have known having worked with Tom, but I've been with the district 3 years. And so when I first met Tom, for whatever reason, I just assumed that he had been in that supervisory position for many, many years. But now it all makes sense that he was teaching for 12 years and then went into that position that he's in now, which Brendan makes everything come together in that, yes, he's always right on the cutting edge of what's going to work best for the teachers, and he can completely easily put himself in the teacher's position and know what's going to be useful, what they're going to get excited about, what's not going to work so well, which is tremendously valuable to us.
Yeah, I think every time we evaluate a software, whether it be a Respondus lockdown browser or anything that goes into supporting our learning management system, or any digital learning support that we provide, I think Tom is one of the key figures that we go to for feedback.
Right. And as he said, he's not afraid now to take risks.
Absolutely.
And that's the type of person we need as we continue to learn about Brightspace and all of the other technology tools.
Yeah. And to think about like his not being afraid of taking risks. Before there was Skype in the classroom, he was doing a field trip with the Baseball Hall of Fame during his Jackie Robinson unit, which is pretty awesome considering, and even like booking time for the computer lab. I remember going through school and that would be one of the best times of writing classes would be, oh, we get to go to the computer lab. And so we would go and we'd work and along there. So for students, like at that time, like that was the technology we had access to.
Right. The other point he made that I want to reiterate is the fact that he had to reflect and change how he used technology when he first started using the smart boards, and he realized that he was really presenting more than he was guiding the students through the process of learning. And that's a very integral part of using technology effectively in the classroom, that you can't just present, you can't just use the tool. You really have to think about, how are my students learning better with this particular technology?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And I can't help but appreciate his attitudes towards technology in general. Like, we all get it. If technology worked correct 100% of the time, none of us would ever toss our iPhones, right? We would always be happy with how things work. But that's just not the reality. Maybe one day it will be, but it's not the reality of technology today. And it certainly isn't the reality of technology, especially in the classroom, right? We're a huge district. Sometimes things can go wrong. Sometimes software doesn't work exactly how we want it to. But Tom is a great example as to how you should be patient. And it's not easy. I get it. I get frustrated easily, and I don't have 25 students in front of me, right? Totally understand the battle that our teachers are going through with technology on a daily basis. But the payoff, which Tom speaks to, is so worthwhile in terms of how we're able to create digital learners and 21st century learners through using these tools with that heavy emphasis on patience.
Right. And I loved his, what I'm going to call a tagline. I think we should make it a tagline for all teachers who are a little bit hesitant to use technology. Just try it. It totally reminded me of the Nike's tagline, just do it, right? Just try it. We should just plaster that up wherever we can. Just try it. It's okay if you fail. It's okay if it doesn't go perfectly. Have a backup plan and just try it.
Well, that's what We Learn is all about. Is
absolutely.
Getting out there, trying it. I mean, that's why our plan was that first year, look at it, explore it. Second year, a little bit more. So now this year, you're able to really fully invest into the technology that we're using. And you also pointed out that you thought Tom had been working in his position for a while. It sounded like, from what he was talking about, him and you both started right around the same time.
Exactly. Great interview, Mike. Thank you very much.
With that, we're going to wrap it up today. Remember, if you listen to us, wherever you listen to us, leave us feedback, leave us comments. We have a Yammer group, SPS Digital Learning Hour. We have Twitter handles that you can easily access through our show notes. You could also leave us messages on iTunes, DLA support at springfieldpublicschools.com, Stitcher, TuneIn. Wherever you listen to this podcast, you do have the ability to make comments, and it does come back to us, and we do appreciate them when we do see them and hear them. So please do that, and especially if you use iTunes, if you give us a rating, it helps us get bumped up, which is kind of neat. And if we can get bumped all the way up to the top, even if it's for a day of having the most downloaded podcast, that would be super awesome. This will be our last podcast before the new year, and so we just want to all sit here and thank you for this past number of months that we've been doing this together. We're almost at a full year with this podcast, Suzanne. It's been a lot of fun and excitement.
It has been a lot of fun, Mike, and never did I ever think that I would be part of a podcast, but I am very happy that I am on board with this. Can't wait to see what happens next.
And we're glad that Brendan is pulled away from his desk and allowed to join us with all the other crazy stuff he's got going on. So it'll be more exciting as the year goes on, and we've got a lot of great things coming up.
Thanks, Mike and Suzanne. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to chime in and kind of share my experiences and what I'm seeing at the school. So it's great to be a part of.
So from all of us, have a happy whatever you celebrate. With that in mind, I'm Mike Thomas.
I'm Suzanne Zargis.
And I'm Brendan Reed.
And we'll see you next year.